Hello and welcome to the Tifo Football podcast. I'm Joe Devine, and today I'm delighted to be joined by JJ Bull.
Hello.
John Mackenzie.
Hello!
And, here he comes, all the way from his snow palace of wonder in the grey land of nothingness, Media City. It's Hamburg's Seb Stafford Bloor. Yes, that's right. Seb, I don't know if people know this, Seb lives in the media city of Germany, where it's always grey, but they make delicious
It is
churros.
always grey.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I had some great
Hey,
poutine.
you saw a really nice. You saw a really nice bunker as well.
A bunker, I love that
Don't
bunker.
undersell your experience.
I talked about the bunker last week, I think, didn't I? Didn't I talk about the bunker?
Yeah, I heard you took him to the Milan tour.
It's the only thing in Hamburg that he took a photograph of.
It's a big bunker. I want to see the bunker and other war stuff.
Was it a war thing?
I think it was a war thing. Yeah,
I thought it was the German version of the barbecue.
It'd be weird to build a bunker in peacetime unless you were very paranoid.
A bunker is just what you call it, right?
I think a bunker's
You could call your house a bunker if you wanted to.
You could do if it would protect you from falling bombs.
I mean,
this is a dangerous area for us to step into, and Steve's already telling me to speed it up. So there we go. Also, hi to Steve Hankey, producer. Hello, Steve.
Hello.
That's enough from you. Here's things we discussed on today's episode. We didn't talk about bombs any more than we just did. There's no other war chat. Don't worry about it. It sounds like it's a tetchy, weird start. It was a normal, happy episode. No discussion of war. But we did talk about David Moyes going full circle at Everton. Very exciting there. Our Arsenal reaching the end of a mini cycle.
It's not a full circle, is it?
Well,
he went to one place and then came back. That's a line.
I'm just reading what Steve's written.
Wow.
Listen.
Steve, isn't it?
We all know what happens when I read what Steve's written.
Yeah.
I start talking about war. The multiplayer food game Overcooked. We learned from that. JJ brought this game. It turns out we've all played it apart from
The useful analogy?
That's right. It was a good analogy for what I can't recall, but it doesn't matter. And the
Football
audience will
squad
find out.
building, I believe,
Right.
or getting better.
There you go. Speaking of getting better, Graham Potter will be looking to mould the hammers into another iron-based substance.
When he smelt them.
He'll smelt them down and rebuild them back up again as fiery toads. Swords. That's what you make out of iron, not toads.
You could. You make a pretty strong toad.
You could make an incredibly strong toad, and then you could throw the toad at people's heads. That's war again. No, we played points are bad. That was a kind of a war, to be honest, but it's a very peaceful sort of war where there were no injuries apart from to the pride of JJ Bull. Does the sea ever end? Oh, yeah. And the Easter eggs or Da Vinci Code clues that Seb has left litter the podcasts throughout the years. We discovered, or that's not true, So there we go.
In fact, any podcast appearance I've made anywhere, it's not just the Tifo Football
Not
podcast.
just here.
You're in a lot of these.
You have to, and it's very subliminal, so you really do have to pay attention. If you go back all the way through, then eventually
That's
you'll
true.
be able to decode. I don't even remember what we were talking about or what we needed to decode, but that is.
I think that the true comparison here is that if you really have left littered clues across the Athletics network of excellent football podcasts about your life, then if anyone were to spend the time to put them together, it would be just as boring as reading the badly written Da Vinci Code, and also just as pointless. But it might make a fine film. There we go. So now that's the
docket.
The docket.
You didn't call it the docket.
I forgot because I'm all
You forgot it.
flustered. But that's what's all on the docket there. And as usual, it's very full. We didn't have time to spin the wheel this week. We'll do that next week. But it's a heaving on the wheel docket as well. So there you go. That's it. What do I say now?
Hella full for you.
Hella full for you. It's great to be back, said David Moyes when he was appointed Everton manager for the second time. 2.5-year contract, as reported by David Ornstein and Patrick Boylan on The Athletic a couple of days ago. David Moyes will be returning to Everton. What an exciting topic for us to discuss. I don't know why I'm billing it in a way that makes it sound like I don't think it's exciting. I do actually think David Moyes returning to Everton over how many years later? 12 years later? Is rather exciting. And that's the first thing that we're going to be talking about today. Before we dig into that one, John, though, let's talk about Sean Dyche, because I, for one, I don't think I've watched Everton once. I'm going to be honest. I don't think I've seen them all season. And so in my memory, my brain, Sean Dyche was still the right manager to be there at Everton in their current predicament. That clearly isn't true, and my brain is a bad brain.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a weird trajectory, I think, for Dyche at Everton, because he went in and turned things around for them. And I think things previous to this season were pretty good for him there. And I think since then he's now turned things back around the other way, arguably.
Right.
Hard to know why, and I guess there's some sort of intriguing comments that were made by him. He essentially went to the owners of Everton and said, "Look, I think I've taken the club as far as I can go," which, I guess it's a difficult situation to have been working in across the few years he's been there anyway.
Yeah.
So I assume he just sort of wanted out, and the new ownership meant that he sort of had a means of doing that. But
it's quite a good way of ending a relationship, though, isn't it? Do you think you could try that in your personal life? Go home, say to your partner, "Look, I think I've taken this relationship as far as I can, and you should go and see if David Moyes is available."
Yeah, but it would depend, I suppose, on how you treated the recruitment department in that relationship, which it seems to have been one of the sticking points with Sean Dyche. Just a few indicators that he was moving in a different direction to the way that the recruitment department wanted to go. And I guess in the modern game, it sort of makes it difficult for you to get ahead if that's your attitude. So,
do you have any of your own speculation about what those movements, what those directions were?
Yeah, I mean, so there was a few. They brought in Jake O'Brien in the summer, who's a centre back, who's a very well thought of young centre back, and he's barely played since this season anyway, since he's been there.
Where did he come from?
He came from somewhere in France.
Lyon.
Right. I wanted to say Lyon. Yeah. Lyon. That'll do. And then Jared Branthwaite was injured at the beginning of the season, and when he came back from injury, it appeared that Dyche preferred Michael Keane over him, and eventually Branthwaite was reintroduced into that back line, but I think the sense was given that it was sort of begrudgingly done to appease people at the club. Iliman Ndiaye as well played on the left wing. I think the recruitment department intended him to be played in the 10 slot. Dyche preferred him in the left wing slot, and then it meant that you were trying to move other players around to fit into the 10 slot. So they played McNeil there, played Doucouré there. And I think there's arguments to be made that part of the reason why they've not really got firing this season is precisely because none of these sort of tactical tweaks really worked out. So it's a tricky one, right? Because I think in many respects it's hard to conceive of what doing a good job and then doing a bad job means, right? In modern football,
particularly if it appears as it might have been ideological. Like if Sean Dyche was doing what he believed was the right thing to do, and he's been a very successful manager with Burnley for a long time, keeping them in the Premier League, then there's an argument to say that it's not like he made mistakes. He just, maybe it really was an ideological difference.
Sure. And I think it's difficult as well to, we still have this concept of the manager as the person who is overseeing everything, right? And it's the manager who loses his job.
Yeah.
The recruitment department, don't lose their job unless a regime shift happens. So I think it's sort of tough on the one hand to expect managers to have to control everything, to be the one with who the buck stops, and then at the same time not allow them to do anything, and then say, you're just a front for everything. So I understand that this is a complex situation, and I think on the basis of what's happened, it's clear that Moyes, that Dyche had to go because he's gone to the owners and said, "I can't do this anymore," basically. And I think he holds a certain amount of the blame for that. But it's just sort of, I suppose it's a little bit sad that on the basis of a job well done for a few seasons, that can just be undone in a few months with a few poor performances in the first half of a season, and that's enough then to say, well, this manager is now no longer good enough. The question then is like, what changed? Like, why was he good enough for those first seasons and then suddenly becomes not good enough, right? And I think that's why, I don't know, I find this whole thing just a little bit intriguing, really.
Before we move off Dyche, JJ, it's interesting when you think about his kind of, the way he's perceived in the Premier League, because as we just mentioned, he was a successful Burnley manager for a very long time. He kept a team of players who didn't earn very much money in the Premier League, probably against the odds regularly. And there was a period of time where, he wasn't being discussed for maybe the like elite jobs in the Premier League. There was lots of favour towards him, and there was a while where you thought maybe he could have a hand at a team like Aston Villa or something. Does taking on Everton now and it not quite going to plan in this way, in what way do you think that impacts the way that he's viewed by other teams and his future career?
I think Sean Dyche's problem that he'll have is that he's not sexy enough to get a job somewhere like Arsenal, for example, a random, example of a club you wouldn't get a job at. I think the job he's done will probably harm his reputation a little bit. But I don't know how much of it is his fault. He's got into a club where he's made like a massive profit in the last 2 seasons in transfers because they're selling all of their like best players to make money back because they spent all of their money before. They've got really bad money problems. And then the kind of players he had at Burnley were all the kind of like good characters that he could get into a team to try and grind out results, and they represented what he wanted on the pitch. And so he wants people he can rely on in those places. And so he doesn't want to play someone who's inexperienced or doesn't have the right attitude and the right aggressive mentality that he wants on the pitch. Then you look at how, if you're looking just at how the football works, like I think it's 50% of the goals that Everton have scored this season have come from set pieces. And that's been the case for quite a long time. They're really set piece dependent, far more even than Arsenal. Would you believe? A good link there, actually, because I was talking about them before. Right. Maybe that's why I had them on the brain.
Maybe.
But also, do you know how many goals they've scored this season in the league?
12.
15.
Oh, okay, I wasn't far off, and I was joking.
Yeah, it's not very many. So they haven't played very well, but I think this is what happens when like every other team's recruitment has been excellent, and they're all got good players in, and they all just seem to have... Like you'd often think, we talk about this quite a lot, right? But you think that a team looks bad because they're playing badly. I think Everton's team just isn't that strong just now. And so they're naturally going to be in the lower half of the table. It's kind of hard to get any more out of them than that. Also very hard to get any sort of momentum or confidence going when you can't create chances. All they're trying to do is stop the opposition from scoring. Yeah. It's like, do you ever consider what would happen if you just put every single player on your team on the goal line in the goal?
I think about that when it comes to a free kick or a defensive situation.
What would happen?
What if you just stood them all there? It would be quite hard to score.
What if the player on the ball was dribbling and you got all 10 players around them in a circle?
In a circle.
Yeah,
I've thought about that as well.
See,
why don't they try these things?
This is the kind of like
at 1-0.
I think it's pretty clear that none of them would work.
No, seriously, at 1-0, if you put
11
players, 1-0 up, you're in a positive game state, you're winning, you don't need to score any more goals. There's 10 minutes left of the game. Why not just pop every player, all 11 players, on the goal line, shoulder to shoulder, put 10 on the goal line, and then have one person like anti-libero, inverse libero, just patrolling in front of them.
Okay, closing down the shot.
Close down the shot.
And if they get past, you go down with a head injury, and that has to stop. So
exactly.
These are sort of maverick tactics that Dyche could employ as part of his trying to get 0-0s all of the time.
Why didn't he try it?
Don't know. But this is one of the problems. Like these sorts of things, maybe he could try and revolutionise it. But I think he is kind of stuck. I would like to see what another manager might do. Maybe I'd change what I'm thinking of, I don't know, like Iraola went into Everton and then suddenly had them pressing in a certain way and playing a certain way. But the thing that Dyche knows is to play, similar to a 4-4-2 out of possession, hard to break down, and then you get your luck if it goes your way. But their numbers aren't good. They haven't been going forward. He's been trying to sell players to stay in the good money zone. Yeah. And that,
love it in the good money zone.
I mean, I would love to be there one day. Yeah. And then that would be where he wants to go. So, yes, that's my answer. Yeah. Do I win a point?
I'll decide. Okay,
you know what? Thanks.
I'll let it percolate for a little bit of time, and then I'll decide.
Okay.
You're on the edge of a point now.
Okay, thanks.
Stability is, I think, an underrated aspect of what he did, right? Because before he arrived, Everton were just pretty car crash, right?
Free falling.
Yeah. And I think what he, at least regardless of what the on-pitch failures were, off the pitch, he certainly made them like credible again. Sure. And I guess that's the question, right? Is like, at what point do you say, okay, thank you very much, you've made us stable, you've given us a base to mean that, okay, they're in a relegation battle every season he's there, but they said it pretty comfortably last season. This season they aren't in the worst 3 clubs in the league according to the underlying numbers. The question is then, what do you do to make the next step forward? And I guess naturally that probably would have happened in the summer had this ownership change not happened, and he decided to then sort of tender his resignation, but without giving up the financial benefits that are entailed by that. But yeah,
pretty smart, sort of, if you ask me.
I guess so. I
like it. Yeah. Seb, what does it mean that David Moyes is returning to Everton 12 years later? How does that make you feel? Old?
Yeah, maybe I have some conflicting emotions. Old, nostalgic. Encouraged for Everton though, Joe. I quite like it. I think if you look at the Everton team, I think that Everton squad, I think if you used all the pieces there a little bit better or in a way that suited their abilities, I think there's more than like a 16th place club there. And I quite like, I know not every club is the same, and so Moyes going to Everton is not going to be the same as Moyes going to West Ham and creating a really hard-working, effective counter-attacking side. There's some really interesting counter-attacking players there, like Lindstrom had most of his success in breaking situations at Eintracht. John mentioned Ndai, who I think could be really, really interesting in that kind of David Moyes with a solid platform behind him. I also quite like him centrally. I think that would be fun to watch. Like Beto, the forward, Calvert-Lewin if he stays fit. So like, that side of things is good. I think you become harder to beat. I think also like, I think with someone like Dyche, when you got an opportunity at a club like Everton, the one thing you can't afford is a conversation about departments not quite getting on, or players coming in and being recruited and signed and then not being used in the way that the recruiting department intended them to be. And that's not necessarily his fault or their fault. It's wastage, isn't it? It's kind of misallocation of resources. And I suppose if you're looking to climb that ladder and kind of move up the totem pole of English football, then you need to kind of be a component piece at a club like that, and for it to go well, and it sort of hasn't. Moyes, I have a little bit of a concern though, because I might have dreamed or imagined this, but I think when Moyes left Everton the first time, I don't think everybody was sad to see him go at the club. I think there were sort of a few ructions there. Might be absolute nonsense. I might have just made that up.
No, I think that's true. But I think it was more based on the fact that they were perennially close to top four and they never quite made it. And the frustrations were much more of as far as I recall, were much more of a we feel like we should be better, as opposed to this is going really badly.
I suppose is it a bit mean-spirited, like 12 years later, with all that hindsight, to go, no, I don't think so. Because also
just based on our recollection,
just based on like a hazy memory from quite a unsound period of my life. Yeah. That's how it felt at the time. I don't know. Like I felt Everton, like there was always a sort of a conflict between what Everton were historically, a great club of English football, versus what they were in the kind of the new landscape of the game then, which was lots of new money, lots of transfer spending that they couldn't compete with. And Moyes actually doing a pretty good job for most of his time there with the development of players. And, I think also what he did with Fellaini, yes, and Tim Cahill. I know Fellaini became a little bit of a joke at Man United, but he was a very, very good player at Everton, a very versatile one. Yeah, Cahill was an excellent player.
Stephen Pienaar.
Andy Johnson, did very
well. That's such a good. I've never thought of him in the whole. He would win the game in a heartbeat.
Player, right?
He's going straight into your WhatsApp group game, JJ.
Yeah, I'll do it now.
He's doing it now.
And there are a few of them, like Leon Osman was a good player. Billy Etanov. I don't think I've pronounced that right. But do you remember the winger from Russia, the left-sided player?
Yeah, he was great. Don't laugh at me, John. I was trying to.
He's an English person.
Billy Etanov. Yeah.
Yeah, and so and the point I was trying to make is the recruitment under Moyes is often quite good, but I don't know why that was. I know that internally they did a really good job of mapping their way through seasons. Like, this player is going to be playing for us hopefully in this season, and then this season plus one, and so the recruitment was really well done, and they got a lot of efficiency out of their spending, as far as I remember. A lot of this is just hunch.
No, I think it's
probably true because I feel it might be.
It strikes me as, I don't want to say it again because I've said it about 15 times on this podcast over the years, but it's my great Everton theory under Moyes that they were on a 4-year cycle and they were super effective at always getting just back up, just missing out on top four, always the perennial forevers. It's interesting. You mentioned the past there, Seb. You mentioned totem pole. One of the things I think that's changed in the intervening time, the 12 years since David Moyes was Everton manager last time, is the quality of the coaches across the league. So Steve Hankey, producer, has kindly given us a list here of the managers who were in charge of the Premier League teams the last season that David Moyes was at Everton. So I believe that was the 2012-13 season. And I'm just going to take a meander on down this list now, because there's some fine names here. Fine names here. I'm looking at Arsene Wenger at Arsenal. Of course, that was the season that Rafael Benitez was the Chelsea manager. That was it feels only like yesterday that happened, doesn't it? But no, that was that season there. We're also seeing Brendan Rodgers at Liverpool. It was that era. Sir Alex Ferguson, I don't know who that was. Who else have we got on this? Oh, Harry Redknapp at Queen's Park Rangers. That was a great year. Tony Pulis. Now, of course, Tony Pulis is a very modern sort of coach. I believe he's the current Arsenal manager. Oh, wait, no, that's Mikel Arteta. My bad. Michael Laudrup at Swansea City. Remember that?
That was fun.
That was fun. And also Roberto Martinez at Wigan, who had that fantastic. I believe this was the season that Wigan.
Sam Allardyce at West Ham.
Well, yes, this is the thing. So Sam Allardyce was there. We also had Steve Clarke at West Brom. It was Andre Villas-Boas' season at Tottenham Hotspur. Paolo Di Canio was the Sunderland manager. Good Lord. And of course, Alan Pardew was, I don't know how many years into his 8-year contract at Newcastle United.
Newcastle, yeah.
I'm not laughing at Alan Pardew, of course. I'm simply laughing at an 8-year contract for a manager. That is funny. And also, this list does say Brian Kidd was the current caretaker manager for Man City. That we figured out that was between Roberto Mancini and Pellegrini. Chris Hughton there for Norwich City as well. So the point I suppose I'm making overall, Nigel Adkins at Reading, is if you look at the list of Premier League managers today, John, it is absolutely astounding in terms of quality. It's hard to find a team that has a manager that you wouldn't point out and say, that's one of the best managers in the world, or that's a manager that would excite many of the top teams in the other top 5 European leagues, right? That's the huge difference between when David Moyes was last at Everton and when he's about to go back now.
Yeah, I mean, I've not added it up, but it looks like over half of the coaches here are UK managers, and I think there's barely any in the Premier League today. Yeah, 12 years doesn't seem that long. And I think that this is why, I think so many of the takes on Moyes to Everton are sort of largely nostalgic. I don't think people realise how far the game has come, both in and out of possession. Like I would say that the really big jumps in out of possession, the level and quality of out of possession as we see it today happened in the last 5 years.
Yeah.
Certainly within the last decade. So we're already talking outside of that.
Maybe a bit earlier with Klopp, though, right? With gegenpressing.
Yeah, and I think obviously that sort of comes into the Premier League around that point. Counter pressing also comes in with Guardiola as well.
Yeah.
But I think with gegenpressing, it was there early. But I think even with someone like Pep Guardiola, the quality of the particularly the pressing side of the game really ramped up. Arteta obviously takes it to its denouement in their recent form. And yeah, I think that's the difference now, is that, actually if you look at David Moyes when he leaves West Ham at the end of last season, West Ham are 5th from bottom in terms of the underlying numbers, the expected goal difference over that time. Sean Dyche leaves Everton, with Everton 5th from bottom in terms of the underlying numbers. There is a real question about whether or not Moyes is going to offer that much of an improvement on what Dyche did. I think the areas where we will see improvement is Moyes, I think, is very good at coaching counter-attacking football. I think in transitional moments, Dyche's Everton were often quite poor in those moments, which I think is a problem, right? If you're a team who is going to do majority of sort of backs to the wall defending and creating these conditions to then be able to counter-attack, I think it's really important that your team are good at counter-attacking.
Yeah.
But I also think that, Moyes was last season held up as having a pretty good season. I think a lot of that comes from the fact that the players he was able to play that counter-attacking style quite well. When you have technically good players who are able to play at speed, then you don't need to commit many players forward in these counter-attack moments. So
like Dwight McNeil?
Well, yeah, I mean, there are players there, and we've already mentioned Ilman and Jai. But I also think if you compare that Everton squad in the forward areas to what Moyes was using last season, you've got players like Jarrod Bowen, Mohamed Kudus, Mikel Antonio obviously was playing back then, who was the sort of archetypal centre forward for him, and then the sort of the quality of distributors he had in his midfield who can then play those direct balls. I think you just say the West Ham squad was better and is much better now. Yeah. So the question is whether or not he gets the same kind of upside out of the players that he has at his disposal now, and if not, then I suppose it could well be the case that it's a tricky period for him at Everton.
Yeah, I mean, last question on this, JJ, would be of that list of managers that I just read off, right? David Moyes is the only one who is still a Premier League manager who's essentially been ever present throughout that period of time. It's it's actually a hugely impressive achievement to still be here now. It's also worth acknowledging that what he was as a manager when he was at Everton last time is probably different to what he is now, partly based on the fact that the league has changed entirely. And, of course, people evolve and, your approach evolves as well. So does anything about him going to Everton excite you? Do you think, actually, maybe this is good? He's still got it in the tank, the old boy.
I like that it reminds us of simpler times when Moyes feels like the Everton manager, doesn't he? That's just what he does.
Yeah.
I don't know if it excites me. I think the problem he'll have is that his squad is not one of the better ones in the league, and so I'd say if Everton overperformed this year, I would say they could probably achieve 10th at very best. Because if you look at the teams above them in the league right now, all of them are just better.
Right.
So they're going to need stuff done in the transfer market, which they don't have money to do. Maybe he'll get some tunes out of other players. I'd imagine he'll focus on making them a bit more fun to watch going forward, probably in the counter-attacks that John said. So that'll be good. He has evolved. He even said, I found this interview with him from 2021 where he started talking about how he's changed as a leader. He said, I wouldn't say I'm a great reader, but I picked up a couple of books and I'm picking out things out of reading. It's one of the things he's done. He started reading leadership books.
Where did he say that?
In a website called Leaders Performance Institute.
Oh.
There's something else he put on this, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah.
He says, the winning or losing means so much. This is from 2021, he says this.
Yeah.
Winning or losing means so much. Quite often we can sit and listen to a radio show which will be discussing if you're getting the sack or not. And that nowadays for any other member of the public would probably be seen as a mental health issue. But for sports coaches or managers, that's an open forum.
It's true.
That is, I mean...
I wouldn't like to listen to it about my job.
I would not enjoy that. I mean, I guess I get comments a lot, but yeah.
That's true.
So that's one of the things...
A lot of the comments say that you should lose your job. Someone even wrote into us. Do you remember? Someone wrote into us last year.
That was an amazing moment.
It was an amazing moment,
email.
One of your fellow
an all-time great
nationals, a Scottish person, you weren't doing enough to uphold the Scottish football in the
You weren't really
space.
being Scottish enough. I think that was the crux of the criticism is the...
Your turncoat.
You're...
Yeah, well, I mean, this accent is fake as
I remember
we know.
that, actually, that word being used quite a lot.
No, you're a betrayer of your people. Yeah.
Well, this whole thing is an act. Do you know that?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's impressive, and it's weird that you've carried on since you admitted it last time as well.
What is anything in human existence but an act, though, Joe? We're all playing a role on this largest stage of life.
Well, let's talk about Arsenal 1 Manchester United now, because that was a bizarre old game of football, wasn't it? I know, Seb, you watched the contracted highlights of that, but you said you found them funny, and I'm curious to start with you, just to hear, what was it you found so funny about that game? What, don't you take football seriously?
I don't know. No, I don't take it seriously. I was really impressed by Altay.
Right.
I thought he played really, really well for
Man
United.
Manchester United's second goalkeeper, yeah.
Yeah. I remember when he was in the Turkish Super League, because my father-in-law used to go on about him as a sort of a great developing goalkeeper, and he'd been proven kind of correct, I suppose. But
I like the idea that your father-in-law used to go on about him as a great developing goalkeeper could mean that your father-in-law is a great developing goalkeeper, and he would always used to go on about Altay by India. Is that what you meant, or was it the other way around?
That is up for the listener to decide. I mean, just sort of if you go back through old episodes and you piece together fragments of different things I've said, then you'll arrive at kind of a weighting of which is the more likely scenario. So put the work in and you'll find out what I really meant.
It's your Da Vinci Code. He sort of put together pieces over the previous podcast.
Yeah. The trick is that he's a great developing goalkeeper in the walking football leagues for Hamburg.
It's a very niche thing to devise a whole network of clues in a puzzle to reveal that this young goalkeeper might be pretty good one day.
Have you met some of the people that listen to the Tifo Football podcast? They're a dedicated
really
lot,
nice,
so I'm sure. No. I mean, it's kind of been reframed because this morning, I don't know if this has come up in the English media, but all sorts of unpleasantness around Kai Havertz's social media accounts and his wife's social media accounts have been reported on. So kind of hard to find anything funny within that context, because it's just like that. It's both really, really tedious, but also really disheartening that happens every time a player misses a chance.
This is in reference to the fact that he missed a couple of pretty high XG opportunities in the game.
And he did. He didn't have a great game, but it's also stop it. Just stop it.
Sure.
Why are you messaging a footballer's wife to abuse her about her husband's performance on a football pitch? Is ridiculous. So not much funny as a result of that. But I felt for Arsenal because I thought Arsenal played pretty well. Like they created good chances. I know the knock on them is that they can't create chances in open play, but that wasn't really the case yesterday. Also, I've missed English commentary. I've forgotten kind of what it's like in terms of its narrative, and it was sort of, Man United be magnificent, and they played well. But also Arsenal missed about in a different game that probably could have ended 4-1. I think.
That's precisely what I said last night. It was interesting. I was talking to John about it because John, for maybe the third week in a row, has inherited an impossible game to do an analysis of immediately after it's finished. I've been laughing at that over the last couple of weeks. This one was no less difficult, I would say, because it was hard to it was hard, John, to learn that much from this game, given that what Seb said is true. One of the common criticism levelled against Arsenal this season has been that they've struggled to create chances from open play. In this game, they did do that, and they finished the game with over 3 XG. They just couldn't finish any of those chances.
Yeah, I mean, I think Arsenal are funny. I don't think it's simply just an open play creation issue. I think part of the problems stem from the fact that they seem to struggle, particularly in generating central chances, which are, whether or not that's a good or bad thing, I suppose, remains to be seen. But under Pep Guardiola, Manchester City, I suppose, were the sort of poster child of being able to generate central chances, and they win or used to win all the time. Therefore, that's what you do, right? But the general idea is that if you can create through the middle there, you are going to generate more dangerous chances. That's not necessarily an issue, because when it comes to Arsenal, what Arteta realised was that they didn't need to build through the middle. They could build around the edges, and then if you added on top of that this layer of set piece supremacy which they have, not only do you give yourself a way of scoring goals that means you don't need to be super productive in open play, but you're also building a squad and developing the sort of tactical habits of being able to generate from wide areas, right? So what often ends up happening is that Arsenal will move the ball into those wide areas. They'll have the interchanges particularly on that right-hand side, between Saka, Odegaard, and whoever's the right back on that side, and they use that to great effect. And often what they end up doing is, forcing the opponents into a lowish block and then almost treating it like a set-piece scenario, right? Where you play the ball into the box, and you've got players like Declan Rice box crashing, you've got Kai Havertz as a centre-forward with aerial presence, etc. And the idea being that that is a sustainable way of moving the ball down the field and generating chances. And this is what I ended up actually analysing in the game yesterday, because I think that's all well and good. And, we can talk about the pros and cons of that approach. I think it's tricky, because last season you would say, obviously that approach works. This season you'd say, obviously there's issues with that approach. And I suppose the question is whether or not last season represents what is or should be considered sustainable, or whether or not this season is or should.
We were worried that Steve fell off his chair again, though. I think you didn't, did you, Steve? No?
He saved himself at the last minute.
All good. He hasn't. Is he tipping on his chair again?
He might be, yeah.
You think I'd learn?
He's tempting fate, that man.
Of all the people to learn that lesson.
Pride cometh before a fall, Steve, and you've already had
You hurt yourself very badly, and you were ridiculed online for that. So I don't know what other lessons there are available to you with this issue.
I think in this game it was kind of interesting, because they were in a scenario where they were then trying to break down a low block. And I think when you're trying to break down a low block, one of the things that you really want to do is try and pull that block apart to create more space.
Yeah.
Because Arsenal don't have that central presence, what they were doing is they were going into those wide areas, and the Manchester United block could just drop super deep, overload the box, and defend, overload the...
De Ligt and Maguire could just yeet it out over and over again.
And I think that becomes a problem, right? Because I think in any of these areas, if you are too reliant on a certain way of doing things, it can become detrimental to you, right? And I think the variety of being able to then go more central and pull the block towards you would then create space that you can then exploit by moving the ball out wide. In fact, I went through the game after the red card, and there was not one single box entry from Arsenal out of, I think, 36 in total that went in through the central channel. It was all coming down the right-hand side mainly. There was some left-hand side stuff from Martinelli, but most of it was either box crossing from around the corner flag, or it was Martin Odegaard in the half space, finding those back post crosses, which proved to be, I think, profitable. They created enough chances to actually win the game. But I think it's one of those scenarios where you think, well, if you have that variety to be able to move the ball more centrally, pull their block out, then go back into the wider spaces, you've then created the space that you can then attack. I've said the word "then" a lot there. But
you also hit your mic.
I've got a question though. In that situation though, if you're the things that John's have described kind of demand a certain level of chemistry. And if you think of the disruption that Arsenal has suffered, Saka's the obvious problem. Odegaard missed part of the season, but also doesn't look quite the player he was before he left yet. They've chopped and changed at both right and left fullback. It feels like there's a slowness to Arsenal's football this season that there wasn't. I don't know if I've imagined that, or I just want to see it because of my Spurs allegiance, but it just seems like it's a step or two less slick than it was maybe 18 months ago. I don't know if that's anything that anybody else has seen.
I think that's probably true, right? I mean, it brings me on to my next question neatly, which is relevant to what you've just referenced there. So, I mean, Ødegaard was clearly injured, it looked like, in yesterday's game. John, you noticed that Declan Rice wasn't on set pieces when they did bring him on, was suggesting that maybe he couldn't really kick the ball very hard, and that's why he was at back post for headers the whole time. So perhaps he's been, rushed back maybe because there's a bit of an injury crisis. It made me reflect, JJ, on the kind of that 18-month period that Arsenal had when they were at their peak, when they were playing at their best, when they kind of miraculously didn't really suffer any injuries to their first-team players, and they were all on great form. We were discussing this last night and talking about the notion that fans have a tendency, and sometimes we have a tendency too, to think that a team's level is the level they're at when they're at their best. And Arsenal, had this incredible period of sustaining that. To the expectation, because they didn't win the league, that they were just going to keep getting better and better each season until they eventually did. Would you be worried at all if you were an Arsenal fan that maybe that level that we have set in terms of our expectations for how well they play was the top end, and that perhaps now what we're seeing is slightly coming down from where the peak was, that peak cycle?
I think yes, and there's a couple of ways to look at it. I think one of the ways you could look at what Arteta's done over the period of time, it's almost like when you're playing a video game and it gives you certain levels, so you learn to get good at that one thing. So you can master that. Like when you play Overcooked, you played that?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you get really good at making pizzas.
Yeah.
So then when you get to the final boss, you're really good at that.
I never got past that first level because it's too much. It's too hard for me.
It's worth persevering with. I enjoy that a lot.
Yeah.
But you get good at making sushi and pizzas. So when you have to make them at the same time, you can just do it really quickly at the end boss.
Wait, what is this?
Overcooked.
It's a good game.
Yeah, I wasn't interested when you first.
I'll play that with you online if you want. So it's just like a really easy game. It's where you
a multiplayer
you're a little chef.
game.
Yes, thank you. Joel describe it better than I will because I can't describe anything. It's a little game where you're a little chef and you could be a crocodile or a shark or something like that. But then you just make items on a what do you call it?
A conveyor belt.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
And then so for pizza you need to get the dough, but also some tomatoes and some cheese and maybe some pepperoni. But you get different orders, and the orders come up at the top, and it's quite stressful. You've got 3 minutes to do it. You got to keep doing it. You got to spin plates basically, and you can play it co-op. You can play it versus. It's great.
It's pretty horrible. I mean, you should try playing it with John McKenzie, because generally what happens is you have a poor performance, and then afterwards he says, "Listen, guys, I think we need to work on our out of possession structure. We're just constantly getting in each other's way when we're trying to get to the cucumbers before we cut them up and add them to the sushi. And I need someone on rice at all times." It's a very stressful game.
Yes, one you should not play with your partner.
No, good lord.
Yes,
no.
don't do that. So what was I talking about? Oh yeah, so that they mastered like counter-attacking football. Now in defensive football, now set pieces, they got all those bits. What they need is the last part now. So that's one thing maybe they're getting there, and the addition of like a game-breaking player, like a game changer, Lionel Messi being the ultimate example of that. They're quite hard to find those, but if you can get one, you should buy them.
Yeah, try and get one.
Yeah, get Messi, easy.
Are you saying?
These guys are lazy.
Are you finally saying yay to my Yeet a ton of money transfer game?
We'll see.
Of last
I'm going to not use the word
Yeet. I don't understand the Yeet a ton of money transfer game.
We'll come into that.
Say that again, Seb. You got one?
I don't understand the Yeet a ton of money transfer game.
You're not the only person who doesn't understand it.
But I want to play.
I think I've got it, and I've got an example for later.
Oh, okay.
We'll learn more.
I want to finish my point. No,
I want you to finish your point.
I'll forget what I'm saying otherwise.
Yeah.
It's almost there.
Wait, what were you saying? It was something about turtles or video games.
I think you said Arsenal need to sign Messi.
Arsenal need to sign Messi.
That's right. So if you sign a player who can then open up a game either through some incredible moment of skill or just knows how to finish a chance off, to someone like, I think you saw it the other day when they lost to Newcastle with Alexander Isak.
Yeah.
The difference, right? So there you go. Your Yeet.
He'd be a good Yeet a ton of money transfer, wouldn't he? What do you think, Joe?
I don't know. Yeah.
But you had a player like that who produces out of nothing or does just things that go against. It's like breaking the animation of what happens. If you just always doing what people expect you to, if you break that animation, and certain players can do that, then you've got a chance to open it up. Like Guardiola's always talked. He always says that I didn't win it. It was Messi that won all these games because they had total control of the pitch. Barcelona a lot. Yeah. And then Messi would open it up.
They had a game breaker.
Then you've got the game state, and then you can control it in a certain way, and then other things open up. So that is sort of necessary. But we saw for ages that when you lose Saka, like they didn't have a backup really. When he was so young last season, and it was always going to happen that he was going to eventually have to. It's not inevitable, but it feels like it that he would break down. And now that's quite a big injury, a hamstring one, to a player like him.
Yeah.
So hopefully that does not affect his career. But I think you need to manage him for a little while after he comes back. So you need to have someone there. It's very hard to find. It's like the Harry Kane situation Tottenham had, not having a player who's good enough to push him out of the first team, but who's good enough to and willing to be sat on the bench.
Yeah.
There's loads of transfer dealings to do with that. But the big problem they have now is that they had that momentum and they were pushing Man City and they were really getting there. And it's almost over the edge. We're almost there, guys. Come on, we're on the boat. But now they're sort of there. It's like, oh, but the land's a bit further away and I'm tired now.
Yeah.
I want to have a cheeseburger and chill.
The sea never ends. That's what they say, isn't it?
So you kind of lose that. And then, I mean, the players won't be oblivious to what people say about them being like Stoke.
Yeah.
And
nothing wrong with being like Stoke, we should say.
Stoke, good side.
no, to Tony Pulis' team. I found the video when I first did that. It's like 2 years ago.
Oh, really?
The Stoke City comparison.
Nice.
I'm sure I came up with it. And then, yeah.
You believe you came up with everything, though, so it's hard to know
I think I
when
did
you
come up
did
with
or
that one.
didn't.
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I got it stolen from someone.
I remember when you said you came up with Windows 96.
I did. And it would have been a hit. But then Microsoft were already coming up with 97.
98, I think, was the big one, wasn't it?
Yeah, 97.
went straight to
Remember XP? Windows XP?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah,
Oh, what a time.
That was the
it
last one. Vista? Who had Vista?
Oh, I had Vista. It was
Me
buggy.
too.
It was buggy.
Yeah, I didn't
and
like
then
it.
what was it? 10 after that?
What is it now?
11?
Presumably it's still Windows.
It's 11. Or now is it just
It's probably called like
Bill Gates
Oracle.
Oracle of Home.
I own your soul.
I own your soul. Well, anyway.
Do I get a point? I think that makes sense what I said. Though.
Yeah. Look, I'll give you a yay if you give me a yay.
Do I get a point for that one?
Yeah, but where's mine? Yay?
A point for what?
For my Isaac thing of last week. Come on.
Oh yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I get it.
There you go. No, not just yeah. Yay.
I don't want to do what you tell me.
Why
to.
won't you say yay? What about this? Let me try it. Say nay.
Yes.
Okay, it doesn't work. It didn't work. I tried. Anyway, what's next for us is to play the Midway Game. So we'll be back after we've played it. Oh, nobody won the Midway Game again this week. What a shame. And Seb was here too. He was pretty close by.
Yeah, I think Seb was closest of all of us.
Yep, for sure. Definitely was.
Sorry, I don't understand.
Is it yours?
Yeah.
It is yours.
But why did it do that?
Sorry?
Because I said sorry and it heard Siri.
understand.
Oh, that's
Siri?
Hey Siri,
Hey Siri?
did JJ invent Windows 96?
It's off now.
Oh, we'll never know. We'll never know. Although, would the voice of Apple really be honest about Windows? Anyway, let's talk about Graham Potter at West Ham now. 10-ish minutes for the whole section brackets. We might be able to do it in less, guys. Let's see how quick we can speed through this. Now, Julian Lopetegui was the West Ham manager, John. I believe that's correct. Yes, you're nodding emphatically. Yes. And he's gone now. And, of course, they've brought in Graham Potter. They've brought in another quite exciting managerial appointment because, of course, it's been a couple of years since Graham Potter was in work. He's been hanging around waiting for the correct job, and then when someone else took the England job, he eventually accepted the position at West Ham. That's quite cutting, isn't it? That is cutting. But I quite like it. I like the way it feels and looks. What about you?
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we always talk about West Ham not really making the step up to becoming a more quote-unquote elite side.
Yeah.
And it felt as though once the Lopetegui experiment had gone wrong, they'd probably revert to form and then go back the other way, having been like, we told you it wouldn't work. But
David Moyes had already gone to Everton.
Yeah, that's true. So it sort of put a spanner in the works. But yeah, I think that Potter at West Ham is a kind of interesting stepping stone type manager in that respect. So yeah, I actually watched his first game against Aston Villa, the Claret and Blue derby.
Yeah.
Very, very
The
confusing.
David Cameron derby.
David Cameron derby, yeah. Very confusing to watch with them all wearing the same colour,
Right.
obviously. But
Yeah.
I soldiered on, and it was fun. It was fun because, like,
So can I just interrupt you to say that we did a test? We did a test. You know the colourblind tests you can do on the internet, JJ? We did these the other day, and it turns out, apart from me, almost everyone that I spend any time playing video games with is almost completely colourblind.
Really?
Like, John could barely see anything.
I'm
Our friend
the
Dave.
colourblindest of people.
Our friend Dave scored 9% on this test. There was one other who, and they can just never tell the difference between anything when we're gaming. And I always think, what's wrong with you? Turns out they're all colourblind.
That's very odd.
It is odd, isn't it?
What is it that
The issue is
attracts you to colourblind people?
the issue is that the game we're playing at the moment is FC.
Guess the colour.
FC, yeah, guess the colour. I'm not doing too well on that, but FC 25. Kit clashes become a real issue, but they do have really good colour blindness settings.
But kit clashes shouldn't be a problem. It should be the ones where they are the same. So kit
Yeah, he
sameness.
means yeah, I know what you're
No,
saying.
This is one of those phrases.
Kit
that-
matches,
see,
kit
this is-
matches.
Yeah.
The thing is that sometimes kits that look completely different to everyone else
Sure.
look very similar to me.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you
Um,
have an example?
No.
Okay.
We only ever play like random kits, right? But
If it was like Real Madrid versus Aberdeen,
what was
that would stand out.
so there's certain like blues and purples where for someone they'll see like light blue
Yeah.
and it will be like a very vivid purple for someone else. Those two colours I can just be like I can't really tell the
Yeah,
difference.
okay, that makes
between the
sense.
two.
I'm going to ask you, JJ, to take a colourblind test in the background. I'm just
Okay.
going to send it to you, okay? And while John's answering this question about Graham Potter, I want to come back to you and find out the level of your colourblindness. I'm kind of expecting you to not be colourblind. And Seb, I'm going to send it to you as well, okay?
These colourblindness tests are really funny because I always do them and I'm like, oh yeah, so you get those like a circle with loads of little blobs in it and there's be a number that appears and I see the number and I'm like, yes, I got it. I'm not as colourblind as I thought. And then you read the heading and it's like, colourblind people see the number 23 here. Everyone else sees the number 7 and I'm like, oh, foiled again.
Okay. Well, as they're filling out their tests, which I think is quite an apropos useful conversation to be having here on a football podcast, because football is something that can challenge colourblind people on a regular basis in terms of kit
91%.
You've already finished.
Yeah.
91%. There you go. I got 100%.
For example, if you
What did I get wrong?
if you scroll down,
John, not off mic, John.
John, go back in your mic.
Not
The only
off
one I
mic.
can't
Back
see
on your
is
mic,
that.
John.
John, get on mic.
There's only one on that page. There's only
Yeah.
one number I can see.
That's incredible. It's absolutely incredible. Seb, have you finished yet?
Still doing it.
Seb isn't colourblind, but he is slow. That's what we've learned there. Now, while he's finishing up,
We
John,
don't know that I'm not colourblind. I might be slow and colourblind.
It's possible.
Hold that thought.
While Seb's finishing up, John,
Oh, I
you
see
were
good.
talking about Graham Potter, and maybe can he rediscover the West Ham way?
Yeah, I mean, what is the West Ham? I mean,
I
every
believe
club
it's the
has
road that leads to the new
Yeah.
West Ham stadium.
Everyone has a way, right? And usually that way is like the way that they were playing football when they were good. And it generally just means like attacking football, right?
Yeah.
What they're going to get with Potter, I think, is probably going to be more about sort of fairly patient, balanced, smart, tactically, structurally informed. I'm just saying rubbish now.
What's
but
happening to
essentially, so for example, the game I watched the Claret and Blue derby.
Yes.
And
The David Cameron derby.
what we saw from Potter in that game, I think, was he'd had 2 days to work with the squad, so not reading too much into it. But I always think the out of possession stuff is quite interesting because that stuff is fairly easy to get quick because you sort of tell. The players generally have an idea of what they're doing. You tell them what to do, and you can see that they've got various solutions. When you're playing against a team like Villa, who I think have very repetitive ideas in possession, you can see that a coach will then come in. A coach may come in and find ways of stopping those repetitive ideas from becoming problematic, and that's what we saw in that game. So it was clear that Potter and his coaching staff had a good idea of how Villa were going to try and progress the ball, and they implemented some ideas to stop that from happening. That's the sort of thing you get with someone like Graham Potter. He's quite a reactive coach. He understands what is at stake in individual games, and I guess even at the extent to which he replaced Thomas Tuchel, I think there's lots of similarities between Tuchel and Potter in many respects. In that, I think that they are, they're smart coaches. They know how to get the most out of their players. They're often quite reactive. They respond to what the opponent does, and they find ways of causing problems for them, which is going to be very different from what we saw from Lopetegui, who seemed to have no idea. And then before him, David Moyes, who, as we've been talking about, was very much a sort of defend well and then make the most of your attacking moments. With Potter, it's going to be a lot more considered, a lot more patient. It's going to be a lot more about possession, trying to work the ball forward in sustainable and repeatable ways. So
the real question is whether West Ham can finally make that jump, that stylistic jump, under a new coach,
I think so. And he has the players to do that.
Yeah.
They have the attacking players to make that work as well. The big criticism with Potter is always, I think, that because of almost the same as Tuchel, right? You end up with this sort of ponderousness in possession, which, whilst it means that you are always going to find yourself in the final third, when you get there, the opponent are usually quite well set, from a defensive structural point of view. And the question is how well you can break down the sort of the low blocks that you're almost creating, right? he's got the players. I think that won't be necessarily an issue. And I think in the short term, the thing is going to be, I think he'll definitely raise the floor a lot with that West Ham squad. The question is going to be where does the ceiling lie? So I think it's going to be really fascinating to see how it plays out.
Well, the next obvious question off the back of that I know all the listeners want to know the answer to is Seb Stafford-Bloor colourblind or not? Seb, what was your score?
100% not colourblind.
100%. Me and Seb 100%.
I know why I got 91 though. It's because I thought the one was a fancy.
Yeah.
It was like a fancy one. It was a 7.
There's a hard one in there. I know. I did that test as well, and that's the one that you failed on. I looked at it twice because I thought, this is a tricksy little number, isn't it?
But I got it right for the purposes of entertainment.
Yeah. So I like to think that I'm either 100% not colourblind, or I am 91% not colourblind, but I'm really smart, and I guess the correct number in the tricky one. Anyway, of course, we have one colourblind person here with us. That's John Mackenzie. The rest of us can all see him. And it would behoove us, wouldn't it, Steve Hankey, to bear that in mind when we're thinking about what jerseys and strips these football teams are wearing, and how awful it would be if you couldn't really tell the difference. Also, how surprising it is that John Mackenzie, despite his obvious inability to tell the difference between two different people, has become a very successful analyst. Almost as though it's just all luck and variance.
I just guessed all the time.
Who could say? Well, there we go. That was the short bit where we talked about Graham Potter at West Ham. I'm sure there'll be more of that in the weeks to come. Why, indeed, did we launch the episode by discussing David Moyes for a long time and then leave Graham Potter and West Ham for a small section at the end? Is it because we think that West Ham and Graham Potter are of smaller concern, less important, less interesting? Yes, it is all of those things. Now, JJ, you said you had a Yeet a ton of money transfer game candidate for me. Are you ready? Are you ready to part with that?
Yes.
All right, okay. I hand over to you. Don't worry, Seb. You're going to learn what it means by playing the game.
But how can I judge the quality of JJ's?
You don't need to. I'm going to judge.
Okay.
And then you'll learn something about it on the basis of that, okay? JJ?
Man United should buy...
Yeet a ton of money.
Not buy. They should yeet a ton of money.
Man United should put a ton of money.
Come on. What's wrong with you? What is it just because we said the cool word first and now you're like, actually, I'm not going to say it because they're already saying it? But if we hadn't said it, yeet's exactly the kind of word that you would say.
I'm on the cusp
contrarian
of
spectrum.
Yeah.
Come on, say it. Say it.
Man United should yeet
a ton of money.
A ton of money.
Excellent. At who?
Jude Bellingham.
No, it's not it, is it? That's not it. You don't understand the game.
I think we need to hear. He needs to give some reasoning.
Okay, go on. Explain it more.
They need a superstar leader.
Yeah.
Captain. They need a midfielder to go alongside Ugarte in that midfield too. Someone who can do all of it.
Yeah.
Who can be the leader. He's really good. He would fix it and make them better.
I don't think it's just never going to happen, you know? That's part of it though, right? Like in order to yeet a ton of money, you would still need the opportunity to yeet a ton of money, you know? Isak is gettable, I would say. I don't think Jude Bellingham's
in what
gettable.
time frame though? Because they wouldn't sell him for 100. They'd sell him for 150 million, maybe.
Sell him in the summer, you know, 150. Sure, but why not? You know, why not? Arsenal only need one player. Man United need 12.
All right, Man United should buy Aurelien Tchouameni.
I don't know. Maybe I would need more of that. Well, the game it's a game of feelings, Seb. It's a game of feelings. Okay, what the game is. And that's why I feel confident in saying it's a nay to JJ's candidate, because it doesn't feel right to me. My candidate of last week, who is a canon yay for this game, by the way, was Arsenal should just spend a lot of money on the player Isak, right? You know, the example that John gave last week was if they were offered him for 150 million, they should just spend the money. Don't think about it. You know, it might not be completely efficient, but he's exactly the player that they need. And they should just do it, right? You know,
it makes you feel happy. The prospect of it is
it just feels right. It just feels,
and it would
right.
improve the team, right?
It would improve the team, and it's possible. It's plausible.
For me, the game itself stems from the fact that often we spend a huge amount of time just walking around the dustbins talking about why a team should sign a player.
Sure.
And I think there's some players who you don't even need to do that. You just need to be like, explain. As soon as someone just says the name, you're like, yeah, spend the money. That will fix the problems.
And I didn't feel it. I didn't feel it with Bellingham. I didn't feel it. I don't think you really get or enjoy this game. I'm going to say it.
Well, let's just say that we agree to disagree.
How hard it was for him to say Yeet, but he did say it. So well done, and thank you for your participation. Try again next week, and someone else will bring a Yeet a ton of money candidate next. Maybe we'll never get another one. Maybe we'll never get. It's possible that Isaac to Arsenal is the only accurate Yeet a ton of money candidate. Now, before we finish up, let's also play Points Are Bad. I forgot. Did you work these scores out?
Yes, they're on the script. I just wanted to make sure I understood the frankly ununderstandable metrics for which this game is judged.
Let me tell you, Steve Hankey, I didn't want to make you feel bad earlier, okay? But there are many people playing their own Points of Bad games at home, and they've understood it perfectly well, okay? So either it's a slightly complicated, convoluted game, or maybe your maths, Steve Hankey, and your grasp of simple concepts is just a little loose.
It's not us, it's you.
Yeah. There you go.
I am stretching my B at GCSE Maths at this point.
Okay, but you've done a fine job today, let me tell you, because, of course, the games that we picked for last week were St. Pauli Eintracht Frankfurt, we chose. And
did we choose
we
that?
did choose that, Seb. And you guessed,
what did we pick?
guessed 3-0 St. Pauli. Well done to you.
You had me guessing that St. Pauli are going to score 3 times at home.
That's right.
Against Eintracht.
That is absolutely right.
Who did the picking?
Rachel picked for you last week.
Rachel.
That's right. She's looking very sheepish in the control booth.
She should look sheepish.
Well, indeed. Well, Seb, that's right. You didn't have a great week actually with Rachel picking for you, but you did do better than JJ, who added 8 overall as his total. Because of course you'll recall, JJ, that you predicted 3-4 to Manchester United, or Arsenal. Doesn't really matter either way. And you also predicted a 3-1 to Eintracht Frankfurt, and that score was 1-0 to St. Pauli. Okay. So you've picked up rather a number of points there. Seb, you did second worst. You added 6 in the guise of Rachel. You said it was going to be 2-2 Arsenal Manchester United, so not far off there.
That was a good pick. That was a good pick by Rachel.
Selection from Seb Rachel. But of course, as we said earlier, 3-0 St. Pauli. It was in fact 1-0.
That was not a good pick, Rachel.
No, it was a bad pick, Rachel. But alas, no problem. You've added 6 points overall to take your total up to 86. So you are now 3 ahead of JJ, who's in 89.
JJ, you're still last. I haven't played for like 6 weeks.
That's true. A conglomeration of people have done better than JJ.
I think I've had 3 of my own picks since the season began.
It's terrific. It's terrific news.
It's gone on long enough where like that opening day Lolathon that he did with like the 11-4 result, it no longer holds any water. So it's now just an actual meritocracy.
That's true. I agree entirely with that, Seb. And let me tell you, I did okay-ish this week. I added 5 points for my predictions. John, you had a terrific week. You only added 2. Now, let me tell you, the gap between us, it was 7 before. It's now down to 4. You're on 74 points. I'm on 70. I'm starting to get a little itch in a place I don't want to mention because it's on my body. And I don't like to talk about my body in public. Unless it's a medical procedure, in which case then I love to talk about it. I'll talk about it all day long. But alas, there we go. So that's Points Are Bad. Let's have 2 games from you, JJ Bull, as this week's loser, in order for us to predict ahead of next week. What are you thinking?
Well, I think it should be Arsenal versus Tottenham.
Okay, Arsenal v
on
Tottenham.
Wednesday night.
Oh, that's very exciting, JJ. What else?
In the league. And then, well, the Scottish Cup starts. So I think what we should do is Falkirk versus Wraith Rovers.
Wow, okay. Well, thankfully, you're predicting first, so I'm going to get a little steer from you on what you think is most likely to happen in Falkirk Wraith Rovers.
That will definitely help you.
But can you tell me first what you think about Arsenal-Tottenham, please?
I think it will be 1-1.
I think that's a pretty good guess, I would say. Not just because it's statistically the most likely to score you the fewest points overall, but also because I can feel the 1-1 from that game. Okay, what about Falkirk versus Wraith Rovers?
I think that will be 3-1.
3-1.
To Falkirk.
Are you deliberately trying to missteer me? Is that what's happened here? I don't know. Anything.
You won't know until the game is played.
Oh, good Lord. Okay. Who's up next? It's Seb. Seb, you finally get to make your own predictions. Arsenal-Tottenham, please.
1-2 Arsenal.
Sorry, 2-1 Arsenal.
No, 1-2 because it's a White Hart Lane, isn't it? So. Oh no, it's at
Emirates.
Arsenal. It's the Emirates. 2-1 Arsenal.
2-1 Arsenal. Look at that. You tried to overcomplicate it and you were wrong. Yeah. I believe they call that pie in the face Falkirk versus Wraith Rovers.
What?
Falkirk versus Wraith Rovers?
0-0.
0-0. Oh, that's the one I was going to go for. Right, okay. Me next. I'm going to... Oh, it's really tough, actually, the North London derby. It's really tough.
Spurs always raise their game for the big games.
I know they do.
Arsenal.
I can't tell you how that. Or maybe this season, but I can't tell you how untrue that is historically.
I feel like they're more revved up for it.
I'm gonna go.
It's like an anti-Spurs. Like they turn up in all the unlikely places where they used to fall apart. So I don't know.
I'm gonna say 2-0 to Arsenal. I think Arsenal are going to show up for this game, and then it's going to spark some excitement for the rest of the season. They're going to get back on that sweet
Kai
horse.
Havertz.
Yeah, a vengeful horse. Now, for Falkirk Wraith Rovers, 1-1 is left, so I'm going to take it because I'm afraid. Now, John, what about you? We're saying Arsenal, Tottenham first. Real hard. We've had a 1-1, a 2-1 to Arsenal, a 2-0 to Arsenal. You could have a Spurs victory here.
No. I will go with
1-0 is available.
Yeah, I'm toying it.
That's what you go both ways.
That's what you would go for.
That's what I would go for.
I'll go 1-0 Arsenal.
1-0 Arsenal. Okay, so we're all predicting Arsenal are going to win that game or draw in JJ's case. And Falkirk versus
Much
Wraith
easier
Rovers.
to predict. I'm going to go for a 2-0 win to Falkirk.
Okay.
They're currently top of the Scottish Championship, I believe.
Oops, I've kicked everything there because of my fury that Falkirk are top of the Scottish Championship. How dare they be top of the Scottish Championship? Congratulations to Falkirk and everyone involved. Now, that's the end of today's episode of the Tifo Football Podcast. Let me say thank you to Sebastian Stafford-Bloor.
Thank you, Joe Devine.
John McKenzie.
Thank you.
JJ Bull.
Yes.
Producer Steve Hankey.
Thank you.
And video producer Rachel Tinde.
Ta
indeed. We'll be back next week with more. Until then, bye.